Hello, just a funny note before the video. I wrote this video over a year ago and cut it together over the last few weeks, but as of the day I uploaded it, Nintendo has seen fit to pluck the game I am discussing from obscurity and release it on Switch, making my video sorta pointless now. Well played, Nintendo. Here's the video anyway. Recently, I picked up the Castlevania collection on PlayStation and quickly set myself upon finishing every game on it, which I actually managed in no time because I played the heck out of these games when I was younger. And honestly, once I got started, I just kept going. The only snag I hit was when it came to the Game Boy games. I'm not that familiar with those. I played the Castlevania adventure once or twice as a kid on a friend's Game Boy, and I remember it being kinda clunky. It would seem I remembered the experience pretty accurately. I mean, back then, in the late 90s, Game Boy games had pretty big shoes to fill when trying to continue a beloved series started on its 8 and 16-bit counterparts. The first three Castlevanias on the NES are legendary for their difficulty, amazing music, and precise level design. Castlevania 4 was an audio-visual powerhouse on the SNES, even if it was a remake of the first game, and Simon is ridiculously overpowered now. Rondo of Blood was a picture in a magazine and would remain so for 20 years before I got to play it on an emulator. 20 years between seeing the pictures in Electronic Gaming Monthly and actually playing it. That's how old I am. Bloodlines on the Genesis was absolutely incredible and completely unexpected. The quality of Konami's Castlevania series up to 97 was among the best there was in platformer games. This amazing lineage only made the job of the developers that much harder when trying to craft something similar for Game Boy. Making a solid platformer on the Game Boy wasn't impossible, just very tricky given the constraints of the system. So I left the Game Boy Castlevania games and Kid Dracula for the NES on this collection for last. I found Kid Dracula to be surprisingly difficult and full of cheap hits. Cute graphics, but not very fun. The Castlevania Adventure was a real slog to get through. You move like you're wearing a suit of armor underwater. There are only a couple of enemies that repeat endlessly, and the level design is very underwhelming. Although the second game was very much more improved. It still suffers from very slow movement, but I forged on and finished them both and got my first and only Platinum Trophy for doing so. As I watched the credits roll on the Castlevania Adventure 2, Belmont's Revenge, I couldn't help but think, wait, wasn't there a third Castlevania game on Game Boy? There sure was, and it was not included in this collection. Castlevania Legends was released in 1997, and it was the last OG Castlevania game for the Game Boy. It featured 17-year-old female vampire hunter Sonia Belmont as the main character. Taking place before any of the Castlevanias so far, Castlevania Legends tells the story of the first clash between the Belmont clan and Dracula. Reviews of the game upon release were pretty bad, and time has done it no favors, it seems, as the "Is It Really That Bad" videos on YouTube have very few positive things to say about it all these years later. The fact that Symphony of the Night was released just weeks before Legends didn't seem to help much either. Longtime Konami producer Koji Igarashi even had the game removed from the official Castlevania lore, along with a few other titles, citing lack of quality and conflict with the modern timeline. The character of Sonia Belmont must be forever cursed, because in 2000, Castlevania Resurrection, which featured Sonia as the main character for the Sega Dreamcast, was cancelled, because sadly, so was the Sega Dreamcast. I am all for the preservation of video games and computer software, and I love seeing a series like Castlevania getting re-released on modern hardware in these collections. But if you're going to sweep your mistakes under the rug, is it really preservation? Shouldn't you, for history's sake, include everything, warts and all? To answer this, I fired up the old emulation machine and set out to discover what at least 5 other YouTubers did 10 years ago. Is this game really bad enough to erase? After playing through Castlevania Legends, I can say that it's not terrible, but it's not very good either. It plays much like the other two. You still move very slowly, and the enemy variety is about as bad. The graphics and music are not as polished here either. The game seems less like a finished game and more like a project that the interns at Konami were working on in their spare time, which would have been none, because Japan. They did try some neat things, like give Sonya Belmont soul weapons that are collected after defeating bosses, and the cart finally has a save file feature, which means all the carts still out there probably have dead batteries in them. Having said all that, I feel like in the name of preservation, education, and history, Castlevania Legends should have been included in this collection. It would have given Konami an opportunity to explain why it was removed from the canon timeline and would only serve to elevate the other games included that much more by allowing for comparison. And its exclusion means that the only way to play this game is on the original Game Boy or an emulator, and the price of a loose cart alone is reaching the $200 mark. Not bad for a game Konami would rather you didn't play. Thanks for watching this video.